Hi everyone, Karnak here, Serenity Wargaming's and Explanations. I'm going to be covering a how to play of the Summa of All Things event. I'm going to try to keep this as concise as I can and try to make sure I'm putting pain points that I've identified where some players are, seems like getting confused on some aspects. So let's dive right in. So I was able to obtain a Summa of All Things kit. What's included in the kit is we've got things like the control token here. We've got Quaxium tokens. You get 5 of those. And of course, you've got the Summa uh, token itself that comes with the game kit. Okay. So let's go through the event structure. So one thing I want to point out is that the Summa of All Things is a custom scenario for Star Wars Armada. And by the way, anything that I'm going to be talking about, this is me just talking about the kit, reading the rules. I do not speak for Atomic Mass Games. I'm not representing them. This is just purely for my own informational purposes of explaining how the game works. Of course, if you have any official questions or want official clarifications, take those to the Atomic Mass Games rules forum and ask for those there. Okay, let's get into it. So for fleet building, the Summa of All Things is unique and different from Armada in that it uses 200 points. It does not use 400 points. A fleet cannot have a flagship, which means commander upgrade cards can't be equipped. So that's another unique aspect about this game mode. You do not use objective cards because the scenario is the objective. When building the fleets, you have to have at least 4 squadrons. So I've got each side here that I'm using for my mock-up. I've got 4 Imperial squadrons, 4 Rebel squadrons. So you have to have 4, but you cannot include more than 2 unique squadrons. And they cannot make up more than 67 points or 1/3 of your fleet point total. A fleet cannot contain a large ship or a huge ship. A fleet cannot include more than 1 flotilla, and it cannot include more than 1 medium ship. So pretty direct focus here. For the squadrons, one thing I want to touch on about the unique squadrons, it doesn't matter if the unique squadrons do or do not have defense tokens. It can be either or, but you can only have 2 unique squadrons, period. For the Rebels over here, I've got 3 X-Wings and Han Solo, and on the Imperials, I've got 3 TIE Fighters and what I'm calling Darth Vader, the TIE Defender Darth Vader. Okay, and then we're just having just some generic small bases. We're not going to clarify like what ships these are. This is just for demo purposes. All right, so obviously what I'm demonstrating here is not a full 3x3 play area. So use your imaginations. I know you guys can get it. This is just again for helping people understand how to play the mode. So for this mode, you still determine, who has initiative, who has, the fleet points. And once you determine initiative, who's first and second player, then you get into place obstacles. Before placing obstacles, the second player. So we're going to say the rebel on this side here. We'll put Han Solo over here. We're going to say the rebel is the second player, and the Imperial is the first player. So the second player gets to determine where this token goes, how it wants to face. One thing I want to point out is how does it what the facing is of the Summa? You see where the notches go, just like on a small ship base here. Where the notches go, that directs you and tells you that that is the front of the ship. It's the same thing with the Summa token. This is the front of the Summa token because you can see the eyeballs and the mouth at the front. This is the front of the Summa, and that's important distinction for determining when it's moving forwards and backwards. We'll get into that. Okay, so the second player in the middle of the setup area is like, okay, I'm going to have it facing my opponent and do something like that. Okay, done. There is an optional rule where if you want to include the gravity rift, you may do so, and the Summa essentially just goes in the middle of the gravity rift, and you can spin it around however you want. But for this demonstration, we're not going to include the gravity rift. Okay, put that down. We're going to say that's the center. It's facing towards the bad guys because I don't like them. I want it at an angle or something like that, we'll say. Okay. After placing the Summa in the center of the setup area, then place obstacles as normal. And as normal, it means that the second player, again, is who goes first. You exclude the station, so there's no station. We're going to eat that out of here. We got some obstacles. And again, I'm not going to put them all out. This is just for demonstration purposes. But you can only place them beyond distance 3. Excuse me. Only beyond distance 3 of any edge. Again, if when you're playing on a 3x3. So it has to stay outside of players' deployment areas, beyond distance 3. So we'll just put some out and around in such a nature as this. We'll say that there's a bigger board space, and these are kind of just chucked around. We're not going to throw everything on here for what we're trying to do. Okay. Next, after placing obstacles, which again, when placing that, no station must be beyond distance 3 of the play edge, the play area, the edges of the mat you're using, and again, beyond distance 1 of each other. So, and the Summa is still also an obstacle token, so it still needs to be like beyond distance 1 of the Summa for the obstacles as well. Make sure I'm clarifying that. After placing obstacles, the players alternate placing a total of 5 Quaxi canisters, starting with the second player. So again, advantage for second player. We'll put 3 tokens for them, 2 for the Imperial. So how do you actually place these? The first 4 must be placed within distance 1 of the Summa, and not within distance 1 of any other Quaxi canister, with the 5th one placed touching the Summa. Some players are getting confused by these instructions. So when it's saying it must be placed within distance 1, so when it's, here we go. We want the right side. There we are. There's the distance. So when it's saying within distance 1, it needs to be within distance 1 of the Summa token. It can't be something like this, where it's straddling that line from 1 going into 2, because that specifically is at distance 1. So as the rules are saying, it needs to be within distance 1 of the Summa token. So that's within distance 1. We put it down. Second player puts that down. First player puts down their token. Again, check. Is that within distance 1? Yes, within 1. Put that down. The second player then goes to put down their other one, like, okay, how do I determine where this one goes? So again, it must be within distance 1 of the Summa, and not within distance 1 of any of the Quaxium. So again, what does that mean? Well, first of all, find your position, maybe where you want to put that. How far does this go? Oh, this is perfect. Okay. So we're like, okay, well, I want to put it like right there, but is that within distance 1 of this? So you pick your range ruler back up, and you make that determination of range, measure from closest point to closest point, and yes, you see that is within distance 1. But what you can do is just do something like this, where now you have moved that token, at distance 1. So at is not within. Again, I was just talking about that. So the Quaxim tokens can be at distance 1 of each other. They cannot be within distance 1 of each other. Okay? So again, this is at distance 1 of that Quaxim token. We're going to double check, make sure that this is within 1 of the Summa. It is. So we've accomplished what we've set out to do. We put our first token down within distance 1. When it came back to our turn, we put that one within distance 1 and not within distance 1 of this token. Boom, done, easy peasy, no problems. Same with the first player. They're going to do something like this, where obviously that is not within distance 1, and it's within distance 1 of the Summa. Perfect. The second player then takes the 5th Quaxium canister, and it just needs to be placed touching the Summa. You can put it in the middle if you want. You can put it touching at any point along the Summa if you'd like. That's entirely up to you. For this, I'm just going to throw it on there. So, because again, the Quaxim canister must be placed touching the Summa and not overlapping any of the canisters. So this is not following the other rules that the other 4 were using when getting placed down. It doesn't have to be within distance 1 or not within distance 1. Everything else, it just has to be touching the Summa. Okay, that is that. When you go to deploy ships, so for in the deployment of the ship phase, so when you're putting down ships or squadrons, when you put down squadrons, there's a slight modification of the rule in that you can only put squadrons within distance 1 of a ship. You can't use the full 1 to 2 like you normally can. It is specifically only within distance 1. To touch on real quick is the Quaxium token on the Summa. If the Summa moves, does the Quaxium token move with the Summa? And the answer to that is absolutely. That the rules state that if there's tokens on an obstacle, if the obstacle is moving, it rides along with that. All right. So we are putting squadrons down. Let's say the rebels putting some squadrons down. Yada yada. Again, this is not to scale, and I'll demonstrate that in a second. We'll just say everyone puts their stuff down, something like this. Perfect. Ships and squadrons are deployed, again, not to scale. You know, the distance 3 would be quite some ways back. No squadrons would be able to start near any of the Quaxi tokens, so we're just going to pull these back for now. Just get them off camera. Unfortunately, my table desk is not very big, so we're just doing the best we can. All right. So once everything is deployed, there's some additional special rules for this. End of round. So at the end of round, if anyone has the control token, it's removed, from control. That way, it's just clearing the board state going in the next round. For the Summa, there are 3 ways to win in this mode. The first one is just killing your opponent, taking out all of their ships. The second one is collecting the Quaxim canisters, and whoever has the most of those at the end of the 6 rounds, they're the winner. The final way is if you take the Summa, and if the Summa is able to be moved to be within distance 3 of a player's deployment zone, the Summa essentially eats the player, and that's how they can also win. So it's kind of like a slight football mechanic where you're trying to push the Summa into the other player's deployment zone so they get eaten. At the same time, you're trying to collect these Quaxium tokens to ensure that if you can't do that, you're going to win. And at the same time, you're trying to make sure all of your ships don't blow up in the process as well. So there's a few layers that you kind of have to juggle to ensure victory. Again, within is completely within. Something like this where it's straddling like the 3, again, that's not within. It has to be completely within some of these deployment zones. Just want to make sure I've been clear on that. Okay. At the end of the game, you always check to see if either player has any ships in the play area. If a player has no ships in the play area, they lose. If both players still have ships in the play area, the player who has the most Quaxim canisters on friendly ships and unique squadron cards win. If neither player has more Quaxim canisters, then the game will end in a draw. So this is one of the few modes where the game actually can end in a draw. But usually that's pretty rare for that to happen, but it could. For special rules, so the second player gets another bonus in that they have what's called making up for lost time. Those ships will always gain navigation tokens. This is kind of help off balance, first player being first and getting to act first and set up. This gives the second player just some options to be able to speed control. The Quaxium canisters, so there's another rule called volatile Quaxium. Quaxium canisters cannot be moved by strategic. Okay, so lambdas, VCXs, any other effects, they are not able to move these around. There's no moving the Quaxium tokens. The only time these things can move is, like I said, if they're on an obstacle and they're getting moved around by the obstacle by effects such of that nature. How does Quaxium recovery work? So when a ship or unique squadron activates, so when you go to activate them, you're pushing their slider, or you're saying, hey, I'm flipping my command dial and I'm activating the ship. The player who controls that ship or squadron can choose a Quaxium canister at distance 1 of that ship or unique squadron to recover. If you do that, you just take it, and you put it on the ship card or the or the unique squadrons card. Um, when a unique squadron or ship is destroyed, if they do have any Quaxi canisters, before you remove it from the play area, you need to make sure you're putting those back touching the base of the squadron or ship before removing it. So that way, they're essentially, these are always in play. They're not just magically removed from the game. So there's always going to be the 5 running around in there somewhere. A ship or unique squadron can have multiples. So, like, if you spend like 2 turns, picking one up, and then the next turn picking another one up, you can accomplish it. Again, I'm just using the X-Wing here. Again, generic squadrons cannot pick up Quaxi tokens. Only the unique squadrons can do that. All right, I think we're getting along with the coaxiums. I think we've got that pretty much under control here. Before we get into how does the Summa control and you move that around and what's happening with that, I want to cover another thing, and that is the Maelstrom. So in the scenario, the Maelstrom, starting in the second round and before any players resolve any effects, the second player rolls a blue die, and then you consult the chart, which is, whatever the die roll is, that is what the effect is going to be happening. So we rolled a critical, we look at the chart, it's electrical anomaly. Each ship of the play area loses 2 shields unless it chooses and discards command token. You also reduce the speed of squadrons by 2 to a minimum of 1 until the end of round. So pretty much if you got a ship that's got full shields, like say 3 shields, you're like, okay, well I'm going to take 2 shields on the front. So I go from 3 to 1. If I don't want to suffer that shield damage, if I have a navigation token, I can choose to discard that and not suffer any shield damage. Again, if you don't have any shields on your ships, then this effect doesn't do anything to ships. But I guess it's punishment enough if your ship has no shields to not make things worse. If you roll an accuracy result, then there's a debris storm going through the area, and all attacks are obstructed until the end of the round. So if you are unfortunate enough to draw that face-up damage card, which states if your attack is obstructed, you cannot attack, that's unfortunately too bad for you. If you roll a hit icon, the Maelstrom is steady. There is no effects for this round. All right, now we're going to get into some things that are going to get a little complicated that some folks are needing some assistance with. How do you determine control? And how do you move the Summa, and what does it do? Okay, so the Summa Vermimorph is an obstacle token that has specific movement and effect rules. You're still using like a combination of the rules reference guide and also what the Summa event is telling you how to use this. So the Summa, it is, at the end of the day, it's an obstacle token. The rules also tell you that it is not owned by any player and is not friendly or enemy to any player or fleet. It is not affected by obstacle effects, meaning that if it overlaps an obstacle when it moves, nothing happens. And it cannot be moved by card effects unless otherwise specified. Unless something specifically says you can move the Summa token, you can't move it. So no Ezra Bridger, no interdictor moving it around. It cannot be affected by those unless they specifically say, yes, we can move this obstacle token specifically. For the Summa, ships and squadrons cannot be placed or deployed on it. So like if you were to overlap a squadron near it, you can't be like, oh, I'm going to place it there. You can't place any squadrons on it. You can't deploy any squadrons on it. You can't place or deploy ships on it. Like if you're using abilities that can accomplish that. So you can't do that. For the control, so this is where things get a little interesting. So for control, think of it like contested outpost. What do you have that's close to this thing that can control it? In order to control it, you need to either have 2 squadrons, at least 2 squadrons, which count as 1 control point, and they have to be within close range of the Summa to accomplish that. A ship, just like with contested outposts, if you're at distance 1 to 2, you determine control with the command value of the ship. So however much command value it has is how many points. So for example, let's say we've got 2 TIE fighters and a command to ship here. And the rebels only have these 2 squadrons. So when you check range, you can see when you check close range, okay, the rebels have 2 squadrons, that's 1 point. The Imperials have 2 squadrons, that's 1 point. When you check the distance 1 to 2, they also have 1 ship. That is command value of, what I say, 2. So that's 1, 2, 3, 3 points to their 1. The Imperials would get the control token. The Imperials have control. And again, you check that determination of control every single time a ship activates. It's not once per round. It is every single time. If a ship is activating, you determine who has control and resolve moving the Summa. If nobody is in range, if there is nothing here, then nobody has control. There is no control. It does not move. For example, if a prior player did have the control token, let's say the Imperial, but his ship is now too far away, and again, there's nothing there. When you go to determine control, again, you're establishing control for either player. If nobody's in range, then nobody has control, and nobody takes the control token. It goes off to the side. Okay, so nobody continues to keep the control token if they don't have control. I want to be absolutely clear on that. Some people have been pointing out that, that doesn't seem 100% specific in the rules that you have to get rid of the control token if I'm no longer in range. I'm like, well, it tells you to determine control each time you activate a ship. So how can you claim that you're keeping control if you're not in range to control? That's, so there's some wording there that some people are being confused by. At the end of the day, again, 100% clear and specific. If you're not in range to control it, no one has control. And it does not move. It doesn't do anything. But if somebody is in range to control it, then they can, then that player, once you determine control points, they control it. Okay. I think we're clear on that. How does this thing actually move? So once you have determined control, we'll say the Imperial player has control. The player who has the control token must conduct a speed 2 maneuver with the Summa. It can't be speed 1, it can't be speed 0, it must be speed 2. The Summa has a yaw value of 1 at speed 1 with nothing at speed 2. So the Summa moves as if it were a ship with the following exceptions. The Summa can move forwards or backwards with the maneuver tool. The Summa can end its movement overlapping other obstacles or tokens of the play area. So if there's a Quaxi token, it moves, it can be over that or the other obstacle in there. If the Summa ends with its maneuver outside of the play area, let's say that like if it had flown off like the edge of the board, then you move it backwards until it is back in the play area. And once you've done that, then the player who does not have control, essentially who didn't chuck it off the edge there, they can place it within distance 2 of this position. They can pick that up and pretty much put it wherever they want within distance 2 of where it ended. So it very much punishes players who accidentally fly the Summa off the board. It comes back with a vengeance, I guess you could say. And again, it must be, in place within the play area. Again, you can't just like try to chuck it off the board or anything like that. You also can't have it overlap a ship or a squadron when it is getting placed back in that manner. Okay. So we know that you have control. You know you have to move it. So when conducting this maneuver, this is where we're going to get into how does it move backwards and forwards. So very simple. If this is a normal ship, you just slot it into the slot there. We're going to say it's going to move forward 2, 1, 2, boom, no big deal. Again, if you're trying to move it forward, you put a click there, slot it in, 1, 2, boom. I know that some folks are like, oh, it's a little janky here, and do the best you can to try to keep it straight. It doesn't matter, it's fly casual. Don't worry about like it has to be exact or anything like that. This is a game where if you need exact measurements for things of that nature, maybe this mode isn't for you. How does it move backwards? So there is a demonstration up on the rules form that says how does it move backwards. So when determining backwards, you slot the tool in, pick up the token, flip it the way it's going to go, and then it goes 1, 2, speed 2. Some folks are like, well, if it's going speed 2, wouldn't it end up here? I'm like, well, no, because that's the speed 3 on the movement tool. You can't just say, just because it's going backwards, it suddenly can go speed 3. It goes 1, 2. It ends up there. You flip it, and it always faces in the direction that you're moving it. So again, if it's faced this way and you're moving it forward, it keeps moving forward. If you want it to go backwards, when you flip the tool and you go like this, then you flip it to face, the direction it's going to move in up to speed 2. It's always facing the direction it moves in. That's very clear. Some players are moving it like that, where it's like this and they move it like that. And again, that's not how that works. You always flip it to face the direction it's going to be moving in. For the maneuver tool, one thing I want to point out is you can do outside turns just fine, right? But if you try to do an inside turn, the tool is going to overlap the Summa with the tool here. So you can't do an inside turn like that. So that's considered an illegal move. You essentially can either go straight back, or you can do the one click to the outside. And again, you can put it on either side, just like a regular ship. You can determine how you want it to move around. Okay. I feel like I've been clear on that. Let's get into what happens with the Summa and ships. So if a ship is making a maneuver, let's say the Summa is here, the ship is here. If a ship executes a maneuver, let's say he's going speed 2, and oh no, I landed on the Summa. What happens? If a ship executes a maneuver and its final position would overlap the Summa, it cannot finish its maneuver normally. So essentially, the normal RAM rules come to effect. You reduce its speed back, find out where it can go, and then you place it there. So once it can finish a maneuver here in the maneuver process, then that's where it can be, unless there's something else there that requires it to go back to where it started. So if a ship hits the Summa, the opposing player rolls 1 blue die. If it's a hit result, that ship is dealt 1 face-up damage card. But if it's any other result, then there's no face-up damage card that occurs. Now, what happens if it's the reverse? What happens if my ship is here minding its own business, and the Summa decides, you know what, I don't like you. It moves speed 2. It is going to overlap the ship. Again, same deal. It just falls back on the maneuver tool. So when the Summa overlaps a ship, the player who has control rolls 1 blue die. And on a hit result, which that's a hit, it's a face down damage card. So face down rather than face up. So let's go back over this again to make sure that I'm explaining this clearly. If you take a ship and it overlaps the Summa, it goes back to where it's not overlapping. You roll a die. If it's a hit, that's a face-up damage card. Okay? If it's the Summa moving and it hits you, it backs up, and then you roll a blue die, and then if it's a hit, that's a face down. Okay? That's distinct clarification to make. It's your own fault if you run into the Summa. You ran into a space monster, you're going to take potentially, more damage with that face up. If the Summa is running into you, it's just face down damage cards. It's less punishing for that player. What happens if the Summa overlaps a squadron? So let's say we've got Darth Vader here, or we've got Han Solo here, and he's got 2 brace tokens. Where should I put my brace tokens? Here we go. And he's got 2 brace tokens. So if the Summa moves and overlaps a squadron, once you're done putting the squadron, touching the Summa wherever you want to go, that squadron must discard a defense token. If it can't, then it suffers 1 damage. So it's not great to put your squadrons in front of the Summa where it's going to start eating your defense tokens. Now, I know some players have mentioned, well, why can the Summa overlap squadrons? Because in the normal obstacle movement rules, obstacles can't overlap squadrons. I'm like, well, again, you're treating it moving as if it were a ship only in the instance of when you're moving it. So when that happens, when a ship overlaps a squadron, again, what happens? You take it, you place it touching the ship that overlapped it. So you still follow the Armada rules unless otherwise specifically stated. Okay, I think we're getting close to the end here. We are. So, what happens at the start of the squadron phase? So, before any player resolves any effects, the player who does not have control chooses and resolves one of the following effects. You can choose either Tentacle Lash, which is you roll 3 blue dice. Each ship that has the Summa at close range and each squadron at distance 1 suffers 1 damage for each hit result. So this is not an attack, so squadrons can't use things like scatter. You can't use defense tokens or other card effects. It is literally just, roll 3 blue dice, look at what is on here. So that's 2. Okay, then that suffers a squadron at distance 1 will suffer 2 damage, and a ship at distance at close range will suffer 2 damage. Treat it like you do the debris field, where you choose like one whole zone and you suffer the damage to that zone. Another ability you can choose is Voltic Discharge. You choose one ship at close range. The chosen ship must discard one of its defense tokens. If it cannot, it's dealt 1 face-up damage card. So essentially it sends out like the electrical blast that will strip a defense token off of it, and if there's no more defense tokens, then it's a face-up damage card. The final option is an ability called Devour. You choose one squadron at close range. The chosen squadron must discard a defense token. If it can't, then you roll a number of black die equal to the ship's hull value, and it suffers a damage for each hit result. So, for example, let's say Han Solo got ran over twice prior. He's lost both his defense tokens. This monster chooses Devour. So let's say he's taken some hull damage. He's down to 5 health. So you roll 5 black dice, and I roll all 5 hits. So Han Solo just immediately blows up. He's exploded. He's gunned for. That's what Devour is able to accomplish. So it's not a guarantee you're going to roll something like that, especially the more black die you roll in. But there's always that chance that they're going to eat they're going to eat squadrons, Okay. So I want to cover one more thing, and that is some folks, again, are still having some confusion about how control works, and then also the start of the squadron phase. So again, if nobody has control of the Summa when you reach the start of the squadron phase, then each player will be able to decide an effect. Because again, it just says before any player resolves an effect, the player who does not have the control token. Well, if nobody has it, then first player first, followed by second player second. Each will resolve one of those effects we just went over. If somebody does have the control token, then the other player who doesn't have the control token, they will choose one of those effects, and it only happens once. So again, getting into start of the squadron phase and about control. So let's say we've got 2 ships on each side. So let's say it's in the middle here. We're not going to worry about squadrons. We're just going to worry about ships. So we activate, a ship. Nobody's in range. Nobody has control. Ship moves. This player activates a ship. Oh, okay, this ship is now close. It has command value. They have control. They move the Summa. Then this ship moves. Then this player activates their ship. They're like, okay, I don't have anything in range. Control is obviously on this player. I now move that ship. Then you determine, okay, let's say these are all close enough that when this ship goes to activate, each of these ships are command value of 1. So they've got 2 points, but you also have 2 points. And even though you previously had control, it's a tie. No one is able to control the Summa. And since no one is able to control it, you don't keep control. You don't keep control of what you don't control, right? So if you don't have control, nobody has control. The control token is put off to the side. Okay, nobody has control. That means then that ship moves and you go into squadron phase. Nobody has control. And so this thing would resolve twice because nobody has control. So an alternate scenario is, let's get back to this. Let's say, 3 ships have activated, but they were going speed 0 and you moved that ship there. Or no, we'll just start from the beginning. So this ship goes to activate for the first player. Nobody's in range, it moves. Second player activates their ship. Imperial gains control. They move the Summa. The ship then moves. This ship goes to activate. You determine who has control. Okay, Rebel has control, but I'm going to go speed 0, so I'm going to stay here. So the Rebel player moves. You move the, you guys are understand what I'm getting at. So this ship then goes to activate and move. They would have control because they have the most ships in range. I think you understand what I'm saying. So that way, when you get into started the squadron phase, the Rebel player kept control. They still had control, and then the Imperial player didn't get control. So they would choose the effect that it would get to do, and then again, you get the end of round, you neutral it, control token goes away. I feel like you guys are understanding, what I'm trying to get out of control and hopefully alleviate confusion. If I don't, feel free to ask questions and clarifications. I feel like I've covered most of the things that folks are having concerns about. So, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you all next time.